Thanks everyone for joining us for this forum, which is a discussion led by the Ad Hoc Task Force on Restructuring Friends Meeting of Austin Committees. The Ad Hoc Task Force is made up of me, Tobin, James, Glenna, and we were tasked at Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business in August with considering ways in which our committees could be restructured to address some long-standing issues, including trouble finding volunteers, folks being either overworked or worked kind of on a solo basis on various committees. These are all sort of interrelated issues. And at Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business in August, we were given a possible starting point for discussion. And so we met, the task force met sometime in August and discussed that and came up with some ideas of our own. And I think that's what we're here to discuss today. James or Tobin, do you have anything you'd like to ask? Or Steve, as clerk, you kind of charged us with this.
Maybe I guess sort of our intention with this is eventually this is something, of course, that we'll need to bring to business meeting and have sort of a more sort of within the sort of the proper order of friends discussion of all of these various ideas. But for the moment, I guess the reason why we're bringing it here as a forum rather than directly to business meeting is just to give a little bit more space for sort of just open ideas and sort of a little bit more space for thought. And it's still in a preliminary state, and there's not a great rush with this. So we want to just give that space for consideration and reflection and ideas. Yeah, just please openness to sharing, and we're really eager to hear what everyone has to say, and if there are new ideas for how we might want to do this.
Our thoughts. We came up with some suggestions or possibilities in our group, but our thought here is for us to sit back and listen to what other people see, what resonates, what may be other alternatives. So we're welcoming input from all those who are seeing this maybe for the first time.
Speaking of which, has everyone had the opportunity to read the draft report from the ad hoc committee?
Yes.
Anyone need to see it?
Did it came in email?
No, it was linked to in the bulletin.
Oh, okay. See if I can scare it up then.
It might be useful to have those suggestions up. So
okay, I'll do it. That's why I'm asking. There were, Terry, there were several important documents linked to in the bulletin. That this one for the forum and a couple for the Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business. So can we see that on the screen? Is it big enough?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, good.
So one possibility is to just take these suggestions in turn and use this as a starting point for discussion, but maybe before we kind of dive into the particulars, if anyone who's had a chance to review the report, do you have any preliminary thoughts to share or questions?
I think it's the right direction to be going in for sure. I was very heartened when I read read about this. I think it will help a lot.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, when I first heard about this, I said, yeah, I mean, I think we need to do something like this, but I just was having trouble imagining how that could even happen. And now when I see the specific proposals, it does seem to make a lot of sense, you know, and so I'm grateful for the work that the group has done.
And I just mentioned also that sometime back in, I think it was in February or March, I attended a workshop as part of a Philadelphia yearly meeting series of things. And part of it was about the life cycles of a meeting. And one of the presentations was specifically on, what was it called? Pruning the tree or something, but it was basically about Westchester, which is outside of Philadelphia meetings, Westchester monthly meetings, process and results basically of what, when they went through a recent review and reconsideration of their of their committee structure. As we all know, this is not a unique problem to Friends Meeting of Austin. Almost every meeting struggles with this and goes through periods where committees bloom and blossom, and others where they need to be, as a rose bush, pruned down to the rootstock, not to the rootstock, but anyhow, pruned so that they bloom in the future. And that presentation is up there on the website too somewhere. If I can find it, I'll link to it to you.
Well, thanks everyone. We've got about 45 minutes or so to talk about specifics, and if that seems like a good use of our time, we could do that. We could talk about these specific suggestions sort of one by one, and if it turns out we don't get through all of them, maybe we can hold another forum at some point as well. Anyone have other suggestions about how to proceed, or shall we just sort of dive in?
Go for it.
Let's dive in. Okay, so we have a proposal to combine finance and administration and stewardship into a single committee. This might already be the status quo, given that stewardship is currently empty of members. But the idea being that these are similar activities. Questions or comments?
One thing about it is that there's two mindsets that are dealt with here. One is a short-term, month-to-month, year-to-year mindset of balancing budgets, and the stewardship component is a longer range, a slightly different mindset. Those people have to do this on their own. Individuals plan monthly budgets and yearly budgets and plan for retirement and plan for longer range activities, but it's just a comment that requires a couple of different mindsets to address the issues in this type of committee.
Larry, I see you have your hand raised.
Well, it does seem like the two activities would inform each other. So it would be a natural fit, really. I mean, I do that, as Erica was pointing out, I do that myself, and my long range plans influence my short-term plans and vice versa. But I think, how would the people on finance feel like, how do they feel about taking on the activities of stewardship?
Do we have any members of finance with us this morning? I guess we'll have to ask.
Well, yeah, that is certainly, you know, for any of these proposed reconfigurations, the members of the current committees are going to have feelings and experiences that we have to accept and work through one way or the other. There may be overwhelming reasons, you know, this may look, a particular suggestion may look very logical and sensible, but for practical reasons that we're
Yeah.
not aware of, may not work out.
Well, and they're all being asked to take on more work when you combine committees. Yes, so we need to know if they have a commitment to take that work on.
Right, right.
And there's also the point that right now, apparently no one is taking the long-term view. So in that sense, not combining them will still leave us with a big hole in our long-term perspective.
And we have to remember that the current committee members are not the pool we have to draw from.
Right.
Combining these gives us gives each of us a different chance to look at what we want to do and can do in the meeting.
Right.
I remember when we created the Stewardship Committee, and it was because the Finance Committee felt that that was too much work, I think, largely, and required a different mindset to look at the long term. That's just saying, okay?
Sure.
And could we take down the? Yeah, thanks. I'd like to see everybody that I can.
And I think the important thing is to realize that if we're not having enough people to staff committees, it may be a problem of a committee structure, or it may simply be a problem of not enough people to accomplish too much work. And if that's the underlying cause in this particular instance, then reducing the number of committees does not reduce the amount of work nor expand the number of people. So in thinking about how we combine these committees to do all this work, we need to examine what the problem really is and find some solutions. It may be committee structure, but it might not be.
Well, just to that, Terry, one of the issues we have is we can't find clerks in particular.
So that poses the question, is the reason we can't find clerks too many committees, or is it that people are not prepared for clerkship?
Or both.
Our second suggestion, which you probably saw when it was up on the screen, is to combine worship and ministry and care and counsel.
I think that's a great pairing, a natural pairing. I've been clerk of care and counsel for a long time, or it seems like a long time. I guess it isn't really. I began to really want to also be on worship and ministry, which I now am, because I thought it would be useful to have communication between those two committees. And combining them seems to me to be a very wise thing to do.
Having served on worship and ministry a long time, I always found that we had this notion that those two committees were the right brain and left brain of the meeting, sort of. And it was helpful to frequently have joint meetings of the two committees. One possible option, instead of literally combining the two, is to assume that every third meeting is going to be of one or the other, and the other two are going to be joint meetings. That might work. It seems to me there's some specific tasks that take different skills and personalities, and we might want to have some kind of subgroup or something meet around things like that.
Yeah, I agree with both Melissa and Terry. But I think it's a good pairing. Having been on worship and ministry more times than I can remember, and having been clerk or acting clerk more times than I can remember of worship and ministry, I would say I would agree with Terry about the maybe the different personalities and skills that are required for certain things. But I also think, as Terry suggested, that by having subgroups, we could do that. For instance, the whole idea of who closes meeting, and that sort of thing. Let's say we had a larger committee, maybe not everybody on that committee always did that. I don't know. Maybe that's, that would just be one example.
Larry, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've been on care and council now for 3 years, so I'm not sure, but I think my term might be expiring. But it seems to me that committee has as much work as it can handle, given the number of people it's got. So if we were to combine the committees, we would need more people than what's presently on care and council for the combined committee to handle the other activities. And that's the thing. I don't really know what worship and ministry does. I mean, I've read the statement, but I don't know how much extra work would be required. Also, I noticed that in care and council, the work seems to come in spurts. I mean, sometimes we'll have a number of memorial plaques and memorials to set up, and then other times there's very little, or less anyway. So there is that factor as well.
Gallia's got her hand up.
I'm wondering if it's a different way of looking at it would be just to realize that if you have a larger group of people, you just have simply a larger pool. Not everyone will necessarily gravitate towards opening and closing meetings, for example. But at the same time, you'd have a larger group that if there was a need for several clearness committees, and you have only X number of people on that committee, that it makes it more difficult. But if you have the combined of two committees, essentially, you could have, there's a potential for someone stepping up and saying, I could run that committee, I could do that, or someone to say, that's not my thing, or right now it's not a good time, but you would have the luxury of a few more people in that committee to work that out. So I don't know that it would necessarily be more work on any one person. It would just, I think it's potential that it would be spread out a little bit more across a wider group of people that would naturally fall out into certain talents, in that group. And that's what I'm seeing it as, the talents would rise in this area and that area, and people would do that.
Liz.
I just want to get a clarification. Care and Council appoints clearness committees. It doesn't isn't only the people on care and council that serve on fairness committees. And I
That's
just want to
correct.
make that clear, right?
That's
So,
correct.
yeah.
That's correct.
There
we
are
try
other
to, we
tasks.
try to have one person from care and council on each clearness committee,
Yeah.
if possible.
So that's not one of the
It's
things.
not
that-
even necessary to do that if the need arises.
Right. Okay. But the other thing is, I do think we're really struggling with being a smaller meeting than we were when this committee structure grew. And I think we just have to face that. And I think it's a lot of meetings do have a combined care and council and ministry and worship committee, but they are very distinct tasks. And they both, in both committees, there's a tendency for there to be the variance in how much work there is to do. But the fact is that if you have a larger, I mean, basically care and council and ministry and worship are the elders of the meeting. And if they're working together, I think there's certain benefits for that. And I think we could decide that, and if having not enough clerks is a problem, then I guess combining the committees is better than having the committees meet every other month together or something like that, because then it would only require one clerk. And people can always do subgroups in a committee. I mean, that's always the case. So I think that might be a very sensible combination. But let's be aware that that we are just a smaller group, and we're in a time of great need in some ways for committee work, and so we really need to admit that that's something. It may be temporary. I would hope it would be temporary, as some people get trained as clerks, and also as we have more people who take on not necessarily membership, but take on ownership of the meeting. We have some young people. I mean, I was on naming committee this year, and several of the people we named to the nominating committee have not served on very many. They haven't served before. Some of them have never served before, and on a committee, and that's where I feel hopeful, because that means that we might have new people who can do some of these tasks.
Well, should we move on to our second page and bring it up on the screen for a minute?
Will do.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, where were we? Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. That's the presentation from Westchester. I did put that link in the chat for those of you who haven't looked at that yet. Okay, let me find the right document to share. Oh, it's not up at the moment. That's why. Okay.
I'm wondering if people could, if these are all documents that we have links to from the bulletin, if we could put the link in the chat or have the bulletin and people could bring it up separately in their browsers, then the screen sharing wouldn't wipe us all out.
Well, we can certainly do that. Here we go.
Terry, that's only if you have two screens. On my screen, bringing up a document will mean that I can't see.
You can just flip back and forth.
But you can switch, which you can't do if it's screen shared.
Right.
That's true.
Okay, I just did the second one. Let's see which one that is. That's the one we want. Okay.
I keep trying to scroll the screen share and it doesn't work.
No, I have to scroll it. Yeah. Okay, I'll put this up briefly now that I've got it. I hope. Yeah.
So combining house and grounds and community life. We had a variety of notes and thoughts about this one. I think it's clear that if this were to happen, or even if it were not to happen, house and grounds and community life are both in need of additional help.
And we did momentarily search for a name, but I would not get hung up on a name. We can work on that later. We want something that's a little more person-driven rather than maybe community and property, but in any case, don't worry about the name at this point.
And peace and social concerns with community relations and Columbia ministry. And we had a variety of thoughts about that as well, including options like subcommittees or not combining. This is another situation where we'd need to communicate with the folks on various committees to see what they think about it.
Just a historical note on that. We did have an arrangement at one time, quite long ago, that peace and social concerns would have sort of satellite subcommittees focusing on a particular concern. Now, that kind of got murky when we discussed whether the death penalty group should be a standing committee, because people in that group felt that they had less influence in the meeting as a subgroup of peace and social concerns, which I personally didn't quite agree with, but I think it points to a concern with that model, although in general, I found the model to work very well.
The Quaker Education Committee, Library, Adult Religious Education, and First Day School. Liz.
I've served on all of those committees, and I can tell you there's very different tasks in each of those committees. It seems like for the adult religious education people, to sit and hear what's happening in First Day School. I mean, we barely have enough time in the First Day School committee to make plans for what we're doing, and I know you guys barely have enough time to make plans for what you're doing in ARE. So that doesn't seem to me they just seem like very different tasks. In the library committee, I mean, you could put them all together, but it would end up being 3 separate groups, I think, in the end. Although there could be some crossover, but there could always be some crossover. I mean, it's sort of that works too.
Alia.
I can see what with Liz, what she said about the library. I particularly feel like that even though that is part of education, and maybe it's okay, but I see that less than with the education part. I have for a long time felt like the adult religious education and the first day school should be combined. For one thing, we need to have a body that looks at the education as a whole, and realizing that our children are part of our community, not separate from the adults, that they are, and the adults are not separate from the kids. We all are concerned about the education. If we have a program that says, okay, we're going to look at where do we see ourselves going, and that means everybody, then we would plan for that. And it's like the spiritual life, from the educational standpoint that we would be looking at. Again, I think it offers an opportunity for people to give some input and some wisdom to various aspects in two different age groups, these distinct age groups. Again, I think people would gravitate towards doing more with first day school versus maybe the adult religious ed, but they would be more coordinated and work together. And if we, so like Liz says, that our committees take, just the way we have them structured, it takes first day school, if we're lucky, we get finished in an hour, and that's with rushing. And usually we have work like, cleaning up and organizing and things like that takes longer than we have to set up, or making curriculum. But again, if we're having a coordinated work looking at what the adults and the children as a whole need, I see it as a positive thing myself.
Mary, you've got your hand raised.
Yes. Having been on library for the last several years, I think combining it makes excellent sense. Otherwise, we're guessing what you want to educate people on. We get specific requests, can we have 10 copies of this by Tuesday? But that's not the most helpful way to go at it.
Mary, you were going to say something, right?
Yeah. I was looking for the hand raising thing. I think because I'm a co-host or something, it doesn't show up. But anyway, here's my hand. I across these, I'm bothered by that we may be making the assumption that combining committees gives us extra energy. It may and it may not. So as we do this, I think we have to take stock again. Don't rely on the committee descriptions, but what the committee people tell you. Take stock of the amount of work and the number of tasks the committee is doing, and then the number of people you get when you combine these committees, and whether those people are interested in doing those tasks. And if you end up that it is, as I suspect in many cases, too much work for too few hands, then you have to think seriously about solving that. One way of solving it is occasionally you find people who want to do a task, a job, but don't want to be on a committee. And some committees recruit volunteers to the committee. And I would encourage that in some structured way to do it, perhaps, but especially combining ARE and first day school makes a lot of sense intellectually. I agree with what Galia was saying, but it's hard for me to envision a once-a-month meeting of that gets all those things done, and especially if the agenda is broad. So we might want to think of some structural changes, like the combined committee might meet and then the subgroups or something like that.
Joanna and then Larry.
Sorry.
Joanne, you're on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. this is kind of tagging on to what Terry said, plus one other thing. I would think that it might work with ARE and the first day school if they met separately, which was proposed about some other committees earlier, and then like reported back to the whole group. So like maybe one together and one not together, or one together and two not together, so that a larger group would know what was going on in the two smaller groups. But I think that it would be hard for the people in ARE to sit and listen to what's going on in first day school, and maybe vice versa. You know, it would maybe be boring and irritating to do that every single time. That's just a thought. And the other thought is about the book table. I believe, having been sort of loosely affiliated with the library committee, I believe that that was a decision of the library committee to take it, to not have it anymore as a sales table, because nothing was selling anyway, and it was kind of dusty and old and not very attractive. And so now it's sort of an advertisement for what's in the library and also more free literature. So it's mostly free literature. And as far as needing attention, I don't know, that it's like nobody's there. So a suggestion, I guess, if somebody has an idea for the attention that's needed, a suggestion could be made to the library committee. You might want to da 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 da. That's just an idea. So I'm gonna mute myself.
Larry, and then Galia or Howard.
Well, Terry raises an interesting point. What is the objective of combining these committees? And as I understood it, it was in order to have fewer clerk positions open, and therefore easier to fill the clerk positions. I don't think anyone thinks that we're magically going to have more people as a result of combining the committees. Perhaps there was some thought that we would reduce the workload by combining committees, and maybe that's true. I think it remains to be seen whether or not that would occur. So what is our objective again?
I direct your attention to the clerk's item that was presented that initiated this ad hoc task force.
Larry, did you want to follow up on that, or should we go on to Howard?
Okay, I think what I'm gathering is that we're going to increase the workload on the members who are available for committees. Is that the objective?
No, the objective is to revitalize the committee structure.
Ah.
To evaluate and consider what is the appropriate committee structure. And I'd almost suggest that instead of continuing on, Jim, we switch to the other presentation from Westchester and try to put it in the broader perspective.
Thank you. Should we hear from Howard and Erica first?
Sure.
So I just wanted to say I'm not sure, although it really sounds good that, you know, this is all the religious education in the meeting that we're concerned with. I think looking at what at least the functional difference and the ability to actually kind of unify the view of religious education under one umbrella might be a bit of a challenge. For instance, when ARE gets together, and then James, of course, you know, he's the clerk, he can chime in on this. But when ARE gets together, our main concern is what are the upcoming forums going to be? And and then the question is, well, who do we have available to do a forum? Who's asking to do a forum? And so that means that we really, and we do have kind of a focus in the back of our minds. Mary, a long time ago, provided a nice kind of schema for what types of forums we should have. You know, every once in a while we should have Quaker history. Every once in a while we should have something with the community, and we try to cycle through those things. But it's not a, it would be very difficult to say, okay, we're going to coordinate with, let's say, first day school on specific themes for this period of time, because it's more like, well, who do we have available to do a forum? Who's been asking us to do a forum? You know, and so it's a little bit more ad hoc, I guess, at least in terms of what the topics are, what the themes can be. So I'm not sure that could be coordinated well. I guess that's my thought.
Erica, you have your hands raised.
Yeah, we had, from speaking from first day school, we've tried in the past to at least let adult RE know that for the next semester, our focus is going to be on X. And I recognize that, particularly as we've noted this past year, there have been instances where we needed to change at the last minute for the forum, that there were issues arising in the community or in the world that needed attention and needed us to learn more and hopefully understand better various external situations that are of importance to us. At the same time, we had a number of years ago set up a cycle for religious education for first day school of 6 semesters, going around with Quaker history, Bible. I don't remember all 6 of them, but I still have the document somewhere. But even having that theme wouldn't necessarily preclude ARE from having maybe one a month addressing that theme and having other topics interspersed. The idea was really that the adults would be considering questions or ideas that they could then discuss as a family with the children. So it's kind of a competing thing, but collaborating and coordinating on a week-to-week basis obviously is a little, that would probably be too much to try and do. But if we looked at it from more of a perspective of this semester, the next semester, there could be, and that could provide some ideas for ARE to say, oh, you know, people are interested in Quaker history. Let's talk to, you know, our members who are good at Quaker history and maybe schedule out one a month for the next 3 months about that. So that's my idea. And I have to say, with what was said before about library, Barbara, as clerk of library committee, I sent her a list of a series of books related to anti-racism, I think it was. And she was like, okay, well, I'm not good at picking out what you really need. You know, give me some tell me which ones you want me to order and we'll order those. So that's So that kind of collaboration as well, and knowledge of what we already have is important in being able to support the education needs. And we have a forum on John Woolman. Well, what do we have on John Woolman? We have these 17 books, different approaches, etc. So it's that kind of collaboration that I think could be valuable and helpful.
James.
Yeah, I guess listening to all of these things, I just came to realize I have a very good sense of what ARE does simply because I serve on that committee and clerk it. That my knowledge of first day school and what those committee meetings look like and what the sort of regular work of that committee is, I don't really have as deep an experience of that. I was just going to propose, even before we maybe bring these to business meeting as a formal proposal, whether it might make sense to have like an experimental joint meeting of committees that are intended to be, that are we thinking about joining, just so that we can see, just talk to each other and like maybe think about, okay, so if we were to actually be one committee together, what would we need to do in this meeting together? And is this something we could reasonably accomplish together? And that's just something I don't quite know yet in terms of especially ARE, library, and first day school. Those are just the ones I would be serving with, but maybe as a practice for all of us.
Yeah.
Steve, Tobin.
One other benefit of your idea, James, is it would immediately raise the issue of, can we ever get together as a larger group? Because we have to consider, once those groups, if they were combined, they'd still need to find ways to meet. So I really think that's a very helpful idea for the seasoning of this issue.
Joanna, you still have your hand raised, but I don't know whether it was because you didn't put it down or because you wanted to say something else.
No, I actually raised it again because I did want to say something else. And it's about the 17 people who are participating are all James's age or older, however old that is. And that probably has to do with not having children at home that would take one's attention and make it difficult to impossible to participate at this moment. But that also has to do with participants, non-participants who don't have children at home. And my personal experience in terms of getting new members to participate in community life or community relations, there's one person who came through nominating, yay, hooray, and 1, 2, 3 people who came through my direct contact with them. And I take that back. There are 2 people who came through nominating. And I think that direct contact, otherwise known as talking to people and saying, hey, I like you, I'd like to get to know you better, and I'm on such and such a committee. You don't have to be the clerk. I'm on such and such a committee, and working together on that committee would be one way to get to know each other better. Would you like to consider that? Just person to person. I'm recommending that to everybody on every committee. And it's really difficult because we're not seeing each other in person. So that means either a phone call or an email. It's really difficult to even find people out there. Where are you? But person to person, although the nominating committee may do wonders in the coming year. It could be both and.
Steve and then Tobin.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we don't obviously have time to go through it, but I would like to ask all of you, before any further consideration of anything, including the joint meetings, to look at that other presentation from Westchester and recognize that what we're doing is immediately going into the weeds rather than looking at the garden and the opportunities. All I can say for now.
Tobin.
It just brought to mind the need particularly for a knowledgeable, well-functioning nominating committee, because I'm not even sure at this point who's on it anymore, but that will be a major factor before we do much of anything else, because it establishes the framework.
Actually, Jim,
Go
I
ahead.
would like to know, as I know the new nominating committee is getting itself together, who to send my personal, needs, my personal leadings for this next year. I think that's something we need to maybe that's something we might need to put on the agenda at business meeting, is just making that clear. Maybe it is already on the agenda. I don't know. But that seems to me important.
We're having second reading for the proposed members.
Okay,
later
good.
today. We don't have a
Okay.
clerk. We were leaving it up to the committee to choose their own clerk, but of course.
But maybe we could find one of those people who would agree to take the requests of meeting members in terms of their committee membership.
Sure. Well, and we
That
also,
would help.
of course, I'm sure we have a nominating at austinquakers.org.
Yeah, we can.
Oh,
we
that's
can-
true. Okay,
We can set
thank
those
you.
people up as soon as as they're approved today, and set up that list so it could be
Good.
used.
Thanks. Thank you for the clarification.
Terry.
Who?
You're muted, Terry.
Oh.
I hadn't realized that Zoom helpfully moved the raise lower hand button to another screen. It's, in case anyone else is confused, it's under the reactions. It used to be on the participant screen. Go figure. A couple of things. One is the dynamics of clerkship. Ideally, a clerk should be someone charged with the organization and coordination of the committee, not someone who does all the tasks. But in practice, it often happens that when the membership shrinks a little, it's the clerk that takes up the slack. And we end up in the situation of overworked clerks and thin membership. So just something to think about. In terms of future meetings, and I'm not criticizing the way this one was done, but I want to suggest something that might be helpful. One is if we have background papers for a call meeting or a special workshop, we should maybe do that on a separate mailing from the weekly bulletin. That would get people's attention better, and everything would be kind of in one place. And we could also put a little web page up that would repeat that stuff. Just wearing my communications committee hat was a suggestion. By hand.
Well, we're nearing the time for meeting for worship, and this has been extraordinarily rich and generative and helpful, and thank you, everyone. And I think the ad hoc task force will take all this under consideration and schedule a meeting to discuss further.
Great.
See you soon.